Folks, welcome to another exciting episode of Goin' Commando, the only podcast about 80s and 90s action movies in the known universe. My name is Bryne Yancey. This is episode number 10, big milestone for us. And with me, as always, is my co-host who, back in high school, some might say, was a goddamn sexual tyrannosaurus, James McDonald.
Wow.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. That is the best introduction I've ever had in my life. I would like to pay you, sir, just to walk in places in front of me and introduce me like that. What's your going rate?
And introducing the goddamned sexual tyrannosaurus.
I think it's great.
Hey,
it's great.
If you need me to do that, record a voicemail greeting for you, whatever you need, you let me know, and I'll take care of it for you.
All right,
that's
buddy,
my promise to you.
That. So I'm doing good, man. It's been one of those weird weeks, as we talked about beforehand. I won't get into that this podcast. Maybe next podcast when I find out how much that's going to set me back, I'll let all the listeners in on it then.
That's quite the tease. Yeah. I know it's we're getting into I guess we're recording this far in advance, so I don't want to say anything that's too, I guess, time sensitive, but but it's nice to be so far ahead, and I'm hanging in there. I finally got I got about a month's worth of unemployment money that I was owed this past week, so that's a nice relief. Hopefully, everybody who's waiting on their money too has gotten it and is able to, pay their rent and buy food and do all those things that we need to do to survive. I started doing HIIT workouts this week, and I'm extremely sore. I'm in an immense amount of pain from doing those. So that's I feel a little bit better today, but yesterday I was so sore. I hadn't been that sore since I fell off my bike. The last time I fell off my bike a couple of months ago, and I literally could not move. It was pathetic, completely pathetic. So I've been dealing with that. A real confrontation with my own mortality, you might say. And I don't like it. But I feel like I have to do it to stay in shape and make sure that I feel good about myself and that my brain doesn't tell me that I'm ugly and out of shape. So it's a tough thing.
Yeah, man. Age is a motherfucker, ain't it?
You know what? I should know better. I did this video. It was like a YouTube video, this workout video. And, the guy who was, doing the video, didn't stretch before he started doing his workouts in the video. Who knows if he stretched off camera. And then, after the workouts were done, he went through these stretches, really, really quickly, where you do, a quad stretch for 3 seconds, and then you do, a lunge for 3 seconds. And, it's man, I'm not a 24-year-old UFC fighter in training, man. I'm a 36-year-old homebody who probably drinks too much and definitely doesn't watch as what he eats. You got to give me something else. And again, I should know better. I should know better to stretch on my own, both before and after the workout, because I know my body and I know that's what I need. And I know that if I do that, I have a better chance of avoiding writhing pain the day after. And I just didn't do it because I'm stupid. And I've been getting stupider the longer this quarantine has gone on. So I've been wrestling with that, but I feel a little bit better today. Hopefully tomorrow I'll be back at 100%.
Man, I feel you. When we moved into this house we're in now, I had swapped jobs back in the end of March. Long story short, so at the end of March, I'd already taken this job I'm at now, and I'd put in a 2-week notice. And then I was at home one night. It was on a Friday night, and I slipped and fell, and I hurt my really bad. I thought when I hit the ground that I broke something, but I fell. Yeah. I fell in a super awkward way. My leg was kind of tucked up underneath my butt a little bit, and it was really painful. Oh, dude, it hurt, and I had to lean to the side and then like take my ankle and force my leg around because I couldn't move my leg to like bring it around on its own. And then I'm in the floor on the tile by my bed at this room we're renting, and it literally takes me like 15 or 20 minutes to fucking get up because like
no.
my knee hurts so bad. Like I was basically having to use one leg. And being a big guy, one leg to try to like get your big ass off the ground just isn't enough. So
yeah, I can imagine.
Hole in the bed, and like I finally get up, stagger into the bathroom. Like I start putting some weight on my leg, and I'm like, okay, so I can take some weight on it, so I didn't break my knee or anything, right? So
yeah,
I went over and I took a shot, took some Advil.
There you go.
And then I woke up the next day pretty early, and man, like my leg, like my knee had went from like, I don't know, yay big to like yay big.
Yeah.
Like it was like twice the size, and purple and black and just all these crazy colors. And yeah. So I was coming off of that, and then we moved in June. So I had like maybe 3 months. And I remember when I was moving, me and Matt, you remember Matt?
Yeah.
We were carrying my mattress in, and we got this heavy, heavy fucking king size mattress. Like this mattress has got to weigh.
Absolutely.
Dude, it's awesome. I love this mattress, but it's got to weigh 220 pounds. It's the heaviest mattress I've ever moved in my life. We're carrying it in, and as I'm coming up the step coming in the house, like I feel my knee pop. And I'm like, oh God. And it was all I could do to get through the rest of the day. Like I was just hobbling around the rest of the day trying to like bring chairs in and move a big screen TV and all this crazy shit. Dude, getting old sucks.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not the same as like I said, like being like 24, 25 and drinking all night, waking up with no hangover, going into work, going to the gym, going to work out, everything's fine. Yeah, it's a fucking rude awakening. And like, I know that, and I know that I'm like old enough that I've aged enough to know that like I can't do that shit anymore. But I still feel so young in like other aspects of my life that I often, most of the time, forget about that really until the next day. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I can't do that anymore. That part of my life is over now.
Yeah. That happens every time I have too much to drink. You know, like like you said, like I remember like back in my 20s, like it was not uncommon for you and I to go hit the bar and me to be, you know, inebriated to like really close to pass out levels, and then get you to drop me off at my house, and then I'd go to work at like 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm hungover and I feel I'm hungover and I feel like shit, but you know, like I make it through my day pretty well. And then by about 3 o'clock, 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I feel fine. If I do that now, I am dead to the world the next day. Like I'm just, don't even wake me up, leave me in bed, just come and check on me to see if I'm alive.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because Megan is 10 years younger than me. So she's like still at that age where, she can do stuff like that and be fine. And I have to stop myself and like not go shot for shot with her, drink for drink with her, not go hit for hit with her, So that's, there's an adjustment there. I mean, what I will say is that being unemployed and just being at home all day, every day has, I guess made the stakes. It's lowered the stakes considerably on my end, but still something I try to avoid. Yeah.
Yeah, man, you got to watch that. Megan is she's like a newer Ferrari, and you're like a beat up work truck at this point. Like you can't.
Basically, I am. Yeah. No, I cannot. Some days I certainly do feel like a beat up work truck with just covered in mud, dents, rust, all that stuff. So,
but you know what?
That's yeah.
You know what we call that? It's not rust. It's patina. And you know what the difference between rust and patina is?
What's that?
$20,000.
Well, in that case, it's definitely Rust. No, I'm just kidding. But so let's get the show on the road here. But before we get into this week's movie, I want to tell everybody that we are on social media. Go on Commando Pod on Instagram and Twitter. You can email us, go on commandopod@gmail.com. We also have a Discord server now. We were just talking about how old we are. I'm not really sure how Discord works, but I'm going to figure it out. You can find that also on our social media. There's a little link tree in our bios, and that's got a link to the Discord there, so you can chat with us and hang out with us there if you want and talk to us about anything you want. But more directly, this is episode number 10. It's a big milestone for us. I'll never forget my 10th birthday, where my parents made such a big deal about the fact that I was now in the double digits, which looking back is doesn't seem like that big of a deal because I'm still in double digits 26 years later. But nonetheless, I'll celebrate this milestone. And to celebrate it, we are doing a movie that I think you, James, have been wanting to do for a long time.
Yes.
And this is a movie that I feel like you probably know like the back of your hand. And what movie would that be?
We are doing the 1987 John McTiernan movie, Predator, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger
Predator.
And Carl Weathers.
Yes.
And then a cast of other people that I can't quite remember all their names. It's hands down, like we talk a lot about top fives sometimes, like, where does this movie fall in your top five action or where, whatever. This movie, while it might change places with movies like Die Hard from time to time, this movie is firmly seated in my top three and never moves out of my top three. It just depends on how nostalgic I'm feeling about another movie. But this is like Die Hard. I know this movie like the back of my hand. I watched it night before last, even though, in all honesty, I didn't really need to. I think I watched it like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I could it's like Forrest Gump. You can watch Forrest Gump and basically just say the lines with the movie. I could pretty much do that with this movie. I've probably seen it as many times as I've seen Forrest Gump. Maybe.
Okay. I have a very different experience from you. Again, like I'm getting old now, and my memory is not what it used to be. So I know that I've seen this movie before. I watched it yesterday, but there are certain things in it that stick out that you'll never forget. Like the way that the Predator looks, both like when he's not invisible and when he is invisible. When you see the infrared stuff, like that stuff is like, singed into my brain. And then obviously, like Dutch meeting Dylan at this mission for the first time, and they, clutch arms. There's, it's a very famous internet meme now, and that's iconic. That's one of the best shots in the movie. This movie, I think, has. I want to be careful here because I know that we're going to probably do other movies that maybe are that have more of this, but I think so far this movie has by far the most unadulterated testosterone of any movie that we've watched for this show, and it's not even close.
Yeah, you can almost taste it when you're watching it. It's almost like almost in the air. Like you can feel it. I love this movie so much. I remember the first time I saw it. I can remember the first time I saw this movie. I don't want to say like it was yesterday, but it's still a very vivid memory. I was on vacation with my mom and dad, and we were here in Melbourne, staying at my uncle's house. I was probably 5 or 6. So the movie was several years old at this time. But I woke up one morning. I come in there, and my uncle would often put movies on HBO in the morning and watch it because they didn't open the record store till like the ass crack of noon back then. So
right,
they'd have all morning to kind of do their thing. But I remember like coming out and sitting down in the chair next to him, and he's like, "You want to watch a movie?" And I was like, "Sure." So he like turns on HBO. I guess he just had a feeling like it was on, or he had the TV guide up or something. He was probably going to watch it himself anyways. We put it on, and he's like totally my hero that day because I'm a huge Arnold fan at this point. And I remember I just sit there and watch the movie, and I don't think I took my eyes off the screen the entire time. So this movie's always just had a really, really tender place in my heart.
That's really nice. I didn't know that. That's that's a really nice memory. I love hearing that sort of thing. Like, especially with a movie like this that on its surface doesn't have much I guess emotional heft to it, right? But you could still take from it whatever you want. And in that specific case, it's like a nice memory that you had with your uncle that you might say we wouldn't be here doing this podcast right now if it weren't for that fateful morning, you watching Predator with him. So, I mean, it's like a butterfly effect almost.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good call on that. I mean, that definitely started my love for action movies. I mean, I'm a young man of the 80s and 90s, so I mean, I grew up on action movies, but that movie was definitely that's my benchmark as far as action movies.
Yeah.
Is it the best action movie ever made? No, I don't think so. But it's definitely what I benchmark all other action movies of that era is by that movie.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's just like I said, it's that movie for me. That's my measuring stick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's a similar movie that I have a similar experience with in terms of it being kind of that formative. And I don't know, maybe True Lies would be mine. Maybe True Lies is my Predator, because that's a movie that my mom took me to see in the theater when I was probably too young to see it in the theater, but she took me anyway. I think we talked about this on a past episode, and it's again another Arnold movie. Obviously, I was familiar with him, but again, that's like a little bit later on. I think like 7 or 8 years after Predator, but that's kind of where it started with me. So we're gonna have to do that movie at some point, relatively soon.
Oh,
because we could talk about it then. But yeah, so Predator, 1987, directed by John McTiernan, as you had mentioned, also starring Carl Weathers, and yeah, I mean, I obviously have far less personal history with this than you did, and so I think this will be interesting because I think I have a much different opinion on this movie than you do.
Probably.
But that's just it. It's like you associate a piece of art, a movie with like a nice memory like that, and it's not that your judgment is clouded. I don't think that at all. It's just that, like you said, it's got a very tender, special place in your heart, and I can certainly appreciate that and identify with it.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's got a movie like that. I think.
Yeah.
I got a bunch of movies like that. But as far as 80s action movies go, like when somebody goes 80s action movie, that's what pops in my head. That's the first thing I think.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and obviously, in a broader sense, this movie was extremely influential. It launched a huge franchise that is still going to this day. I know that there's another Predator movie in the works right now. I don't know how COVID is affecting that or not, but when I was doing my research, I saw a little bit of that.
Really, I didn't even know
some
that
news
myself.
about that. Yeah. So let's see if I can pull up an article really quick, because we can do that because we're on the internet. And news. Thank you, Google. So I'm just going to click this top result. This is from Looper.com. Predator 5 release date, cast, and rumors. This article was posted on January 18th, so that's about 10 days ago from the night that we're recording this. And so in November 2020, Deadline confirmed, that Predator 5 is in development. At the time of Deadline's report, they didn't have much information about the upcoming 5th installment, other than it's being helmed by 10 Cloverfield Lane director Dan Trachtenberg, with a screenplay by Patrick Azen, who has written on shows like Jack Ryan and Kingdom. However, shortly after the news dropped, some dedicated fans of the franchise presented a very few intriguing rumors and theories about the new movie. So it seems like it's been greenlit, but again, with COVID and everything else, like production being suspended, I would have to assume that it's probably still a ways away, but it would not surprise me one bit if it still ends up happening. Just because, again, this initial Predator movie launched this franchise, and for the most part, it's been a pretty reliable moneymaker for 20th Century Fox, which is now owned by Disney, as we all know, in the 30 years since. So
It's
I guess we
yeah,
will see.
it's definitely been a reliable moneymaker. Now that being said, not all of the entries in the franchise have been good. let's just
Yeah,
say it that way. Not all of them have been good. I kind of lose interest in the franchise after Predator 2,
yeah.
which stars Danny Glover, which I think we should definitely do at some point. I don't know when we're going to do that, but it's a great movie too. Not as good as the first one, but it's really good. It's might be a little bit more entertaining though in some sense because the setting is much different than basically all the other Predator
Uh-huh.
movies because they all take place in the woods or the jungle, except for that one, which takes place in Los
Okay.
Angeles. So it's kind of interesting. The last one they did came out in 2018 and had Thomas Jane Boyd. I can't remember that guy's name. The guy from Narcos. He was in it, and a few other people.
Mm-hmm.
On paper, it looked like it was going to be a really good movie, and I was super excited for it. And it just, man, it was just kind of an unpolishable turd in a lot of ways. Um, yeah, so hopefully they could turn it around. What was really disappointing about that movie, I know we're getting slightly off topic, is that Shane Black, who was in the original Predator and is
Yes.
an amazing writer, has a lot of amazing movies to his credit, and was a co-writer on the original Predator, wrote and directed this sequel, and it didn't add up. I don't know. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see it, obviously. I honestly haven't seen, I don't think I've seen any of the other Predator movies except for the first one. So we definitely should do Predator 2 at some point, just because I've never seen it before. But yeah, I mean, again, like we talked about this last week, but I just wonder if it's like a case of, like studio intervention, movies being focus grouped to death and like edited in a certain way so that, I mean, I don't know if this movie was like, if the 2018 Predator, was it rated R? Was it rated PG-13?
I'm
Um,
pretty. I'm pretty sure it was PG-13, and that's
yeah,
kind of a
see
hard.
that kind of pisses me off, honestly. I mean, like from a business standpoint, I understand why these studios do it with these franchises because they want to attract a larger audience, but
Right.
and it's not that like I'm into gratuitous sex and violence. I mean, I am, as long as it's consensual. But again, like a movie like The Predator, that's like literally about an alien that hunts human beings. Like it's a concept that doesn't work under a PG-13 rating. I don't think. Like it just loses its muster. You know?
No, it's a hard sell for me. I don't think it works really well, and I think the proof is kind of for lack of a better term, to bring up the old adage, the proof is in the pudding. And
Yeah.
if you look at the sequels that happened post Predator 2, I think all of them, if I'm not mistaken, were PG-13. Every one of them. And
Oh, really?
they just don't hold they just don't hold it. I mean, like the I can't remember when the one before that come out. It had an interesting cast. It was the what's the word we like to use sometimes, an inspired choice for act.
Yes.
It had Adrian Brody in the lead role.
Hmm.
I think he's a good actor. He's a very competent actor. He was just out of his wheelhouse and playing this gruff action star. And then a lot of the other part of it is just the story, the cohesiveness of it just didn't make sense. So I don't know what happened. I think that the material for this is really kind of hard to write. It's because of what it is. There's only so many ways you can kind of go with it, and I
Yeah.
feel like maybe people don't. They're just taking it instead of like trying to flesh out our universe like they should be doing. They're kind of just trying to make standalone blockbusters, and it's kind of hard to do with.
Right.
There is a Predator comic series that fleshes out the backstory. And there's a video game. I have it. I haven't really played it a whole lot, called Predator Hunting Grounds. And they flesh out backstories for like Schwarzenegger's character Dutch and a bunch of them. And his story, if you listen to it from like what they fleshed out, is a pretty intriguing story. Like, you could go back and make a movie and fill in all the gaps with the stuff that they backstoried him in that. Like, way better writing than anything we've seen actually churned out in the movies.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised, because I feel like that, obviously, like, with video games, the kind of, like, storyline aspect of modern video games is still, like, relatively new from an artistic standpoint, but it's, you know, it's been around long enough, but at the same time, it's still so new that, you know, I think, you know, somebody who's writing a video game probably gets a lot more creative freedom than somebody who's writing a big studio movie might get, you know, especially for something that's centered around, you know, a valuable property like the Predator. So that doesn't surprise me, really. I like that you brought up Shane Black, because I don't know if you got a chance to read this, but the Hollywood Reporter had a really good oral history of the making of the first Predator movie. And the John Davis, the producer, had a really funny kind of part of this where he talks about, this is before the 2018 Predator movie comes out. He says, quote, "I'm producing the new Predator, and Shane Black is directing it." So Shane Black, I met Shane on that movie. Shane was a really great writer who had just written this great script called Lethal Weapon. We wanted him to do a rewrite on the Predator script, so we put him in the movie because he's an actor, and we got him down there, and we asked him to do a rewrite, and he said he was an actor in the movie and not a writer. So he was the first person we killed. He got killed 7 minutes into the movie. I thought that was pretty funny. A little vengeful, a little spiteful, but, you know, also kind of funny.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite 7 minutes into the movie, but he definitely gets killed pretty quickly in the movie.
I read that before I watched the movie, and I was like, just checking the clock, you know, like 7 minutes, he's still alive. He's still, you know, making those like bad jokes, those like crude jokes about his, he's, you know what he's doing.
As much as you can like kind of frown upon the jokes, I feel like they're pretty accurate for what you would probably see a group of like, you know, special forces military guys saying when they're out in the jungle.
Sure.
A bunch of dudes.
Of course.
You know, in a really stressful situation, they're going to make really crude jokes or say something to try to kind of give some levity to the situation. So, I'm not going to hate on it. But yeah, I think he makes it like 15 or 20 minutes, and then he's very unceremoniously dispatched by the Predator really quickly. But yeah, I don't know, man. I don't understand where Shane Black went wrong with the 2018 Predator. I can't figure that out, because he's obviously a very competent writer. I mean, he wrote Lethal Weapon.
Yeah.
He's got, you know, dozens of writing credits to his name of very, very successful movies. And that one just fell.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I think he has resisted returning to the franchise, but I think what needs to happen is Arnold needs to come back before he's too old. Well, he probably already is too old, but he could still do it.
He is still too old. I think he is too old. If you listen to, maybe I'll send you the link to it. There's a YouTube video I watched where this guy reads all the history of, you know, from Arnold's character from the video game perspective, and he reads it. It's like a 12 or 15 minute video. I can't remember. Not super long, but it basically lays out groundwork for how he could actually come back to the franchise at his age, and it would make sense.
Yeah.
I mean, they lay it out in a really, really good way. So I think it would be a good idea. Although at this point, again, is he a little long in the tooth, you know, to pick up the role, you know, the reins of an action movie like this? I don't know, man. Maybe. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say to that is, yes, you know, on its surface, I would agree that he's probably too old. But with the way that movie making technology has advanced in like the last like 10, 15 years, like there are ways to work around that and still make the movie good. You know what I mean? I mean, he was just in the last Terminator a couple of years ago. I didn't see it, but I heard it was good. You know, there's ways to work around it. I think that a smart director, a smart screenwriter can like figure it out. And obviously, like Arnold himself, like I'm sure knows his limitations and like is a very self-aware actor and is aware of like what he can and cannot do. And I have no doubt that it would probably be good. I think it'd probably be good. So I hope it happens before he dies.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think he'd be great for it. Apparently, from what I understand, they wanted him to come back for the 2018 Predator for a cameo at the end of the movie, and he read the script and was like, "No, I'll pass." and
yeah,
after I saw the movie, I was like, "Yeah, he made a good choice because I don't think even he could have made that sinking ship float any further than it did." But from what I understand, his posed role, what he was gonna how he was gonna appear, would have really set up the franchise to go much further down the road and carry over. So had maybe they had a little bit of script
yeah,
and they could have brought him in, that cameo could have set up, maybe a trilogy of movies going forward, and they put a new lead in it, a younger guy, and Arnold could have been there kind of as a mentor. I mean, there was a lot of options, but again, he read the script and decided he wanted no part of that. And to be honest, I don't know that I can blame him. It's a pretty shitty script.
yeah. I mean, there's he definitely has the ability to be selective and not feel like he has to do something just because he was in one of the movies or in the first movie or whatever. So I can respect that too. Maybe you could answer this for me without spoiling the other Predator movies, but yeah. I think my biggest issue with this movie is that, and again, like maybe this is like something that's explained in the other movies. There's seemingly no motivation for the Predator to even exist. Like, why is the Predator doing what he's doing on Earth?
They do kind of explain this in other movies. Like the sequel, Predator 2, really kind of shows you what they're doing and it kind of explains it.
Okay.
Without getting into too much detail and not spoiling it for you, because I think we should do that movie. As a matter of fact, I'm going to argue maybe we should shoehorn that in and do that movie next, so that it's in our mind, going from one movie to the next. They're like big game hunters, essentially. They travel all over the universe, galaxy, where however far, to hunt the most dangerous, challenging game they can. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Dryer.
Yes.
So
it's all right.
Edit that.
Clean laundry. What could be better?
Exactly. So yeah, that's basically, they're just big game hunters, and the reason they're on Earth is because they see us as a challenge. So that's why they're here.
The most dangerous game. Okay. Yeah, because I mean, like for those listeners who maybe haven't seen this movie, there's really nothing like that established in this first Predator movie. The first shot of the movie is we see space, deep space, and then we see Earth, and then we see a spaceship for like 5 seconds, and it drops something into Earth's atmosphere, presumably the Predator. And like that's it. That's all we get. And then the Predator's just there, killing guys. So I was just wondering, that's, in a vacuum, without the other movies in the franchise, like that's kind of like one thing about this movie that I thought was a little bit of a shortcoming. There could have been a little more exposition about that, maybe cut out like a couple of minutes of the team just like walking through the jungle and put that in instead. That would have been helpful for me personally. But
yeah,
I mean,
they could have, I guess, but here's my argument for why they didn't. They're walking into the jungle. They don't know the Predator's there, and you're not really kind of told until partway through the movie that this has been happening for a while. Every year when it's a really hot summer, this happens. So you're not really given any information about it. So I think the whole idea of just kind of leaving that vague was this basically kind of show like, yeah, we don't really know why they're here. We just know that, when it gets really hot, these things show up. And we don't really know. I think that was kind of the idea of it, to make it a little bit more scary. Like movie monsters, you go back and look at like the werewolf, Wolfman, or like Frankenstein or something. They're a lot more scarier when you don't understand what their motivation is. Giving a villain motivation sometimes can like humanize them to some bit. So when you don't really know why they're running around just hacking people to pieces, it's kind of leaves a little bit of a scary mystery to it.
No, that's true. That's a good point. I mean, and I think it should be said that, this is ostensibly an action movie, but there are elements of horror and science fiction kind of melded into it. And, if you look at it just as a standalone action movie, you might come to the conclusion that, like, oh, I don't understand why this predator is here and what they're doing. But to your point, if you look at it from a different perspective, like a monster movie or a horror movie or whatever, that, the unknown, there's nothing scarier than the unknown, right?
Right. I could argue this fact for a couple movies. In fact, I'll give you two Arnold franchises that I'll argue this fact with. So this movie, like you said, outwardly just looks like an action movie. I'll argue that it's a horror action movie because it's very bloody, very brutal. The scenes where the predator kills and dismembers people are very graphic. Early on, that scene where they find the Green Berets and they've been hung up by their legs and skinned.
Yeah.
It's said in there like they were skinned alive, essentially. And that's horrifying to think about. And then you see it and you're like, holy shit, that's crazy. So, I argue that, it's an action movie, but it's also half horror movie. And that's kind of what made it a good movie and made it work the way it did so well. Another Arnold franchise, I will argue, really is a horror movie is The Terminator. The first Terminator movie worked so well because it was so goddamn scary. And then after, as they went down the line, T2, again, probably one of the best action movies ever made, but they do take the scary factor away from the Terminator in that movie. He becomes not scary anymore. So I think that kind of potentially crippled the character going forward a little bit.
Yeah, this is this is like very off topic, but I was listening to a podcast a few weeks ago that was talking about you brought up the Terminator, directed by James Cameron. They were talking about Avatar, and the hosts of this podcast basically had a theory that that all of James Cameron's movies are about how like America is bad and like does terrible things. And I need to watch The Terminator again, but I watched True Lies, and I, having heard that and then watching True Lies, I could kind of see where they were coming from with it. Because like the T-1000 is a cop. Like the T-1000 could be anything, but James Cameron made it a police officer. But that's something we can dive into on a future episode. But I thought that was interesting.
It's definitely an interesting theory for sure.
Yeah. But he's Canadian, James Cameron.
Oh, that's true.
He's got a unique perspective on this.
Forgot all about that.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, this movie is very scary. There's lots of kind of terrifying parts to it, like beyond just the bloodiness of it, which is its own thing. But the unknown, which I probably didn't need as much of this as they put in the movie, but like the scenes of them like walking through the jungle, the team, and they hear something, or they think they hear something, or they see something and they think they see something, like, that's the unknown, and that's that's scary on its own. And then to have like those like moments of elongated downtime, let's say, and then just very quickly something happens very quickly, and then like a guy's head explodes, that's fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that aspect of it for sure.
No, you're right. And like I said, I think where a lot of these 80s action franchises went wrong later on down the line is they kind of went away from their roots, and they made them something.
Yeah.
They made them something that they kind of weren't. Like, it seems like a lot, especially the Cameron franchises, are kind of all quasi horror movies in a sense. Mm-hmm. Like the Terminator is definitely a horror movie. Here's this unrelenting machine that comes to kill people, and you can't, stop it. You can't reason with it. And that's terrifying. You got this killer who essentially, can't be stopped. And it's kind of the same thing with the Predator. And, I wouldn't say he's unstoppable like the Terminator, obviously, because he does get killed, but he's definitely, physically more than enough match for anybody in the team, even Arnold, who we've already seen in action movies carrying trees.
Yes.
So
yeah, that rotisserie turkey leg,
right,
skin look with him. Yeah,
right. So you're right. I mean, that's kind of what makes it, is the fact that everything's unknown. You don't know why they're there. You don't know what they want. Mm-hmm. You just know that they're there and they're hacking people up.
Yeah, exactly. Let's take a quick break, and we'll come back and talk about the rest of the movie.
Awesome.
Folks, welcome back to episode 10, the big 1-0 of Going Commando. I'm Bryne, that's James. We're talking about Predator this week, one of James's favorite movies of all time, favorite action movies of all time. We were talking about the violence in this movie before the break, and I do have to say that if we're approaching this from a purely horror standpoint, the death scenes in this fucking movie are completely gnarly compared to a lot of other stuff that we've watched, and super creative and gross, and they're unlike anything I've ever really seen in like a big studio action flick. So I appreciate that, and it really does it does tell you as the viewer that, hey, this Predator, he's a tough one. He's not to be trifled with.
Agreed.
So I appreciated that.
Agreed. I want to kind of segue off for just a minute. I want to talk about some of the casting.
Yeah.
And
okay.
Not just Arnold, because I mean, obviously we know Arnold kind of fits into almost any action movie. This movie wasn't really written for him,
mm-hmm.
but he fits in fine. I want to talk about a couple of the other supporting actors in this, because I think some of them have some really interesting backstories and kind of just weird.
Yeah.
I'm going to get to something. We're going to talk about the villain. But before we talk about the villain, I want to talk about the batshit crazy guy that's in this movie named Sonny Landham. He plays Billy, the mm-hmm. Indian, half Indian soldier.
Yes.
Are you familiar with him outside of movies?
No.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with him outside of this movie.
He was in a few movies in the 80s. He did a movie with Stallone where he was like in prison. He was the main bad guy in that movie, and in a few other movies. But you know where he got his start?
Where's that?
He was in pornos in the 70s.
Oh, that's okay. Sick.
Where he got his start, which I found to be kind of interesting and a little weird, because he's actually not bad on camera. He seemed like a pretty decent actor. He doesn't say or do a whole lot, but it doesn't seem like anything he's doing is really odd, if that makes sense. Like, you can kind of see when somebody's a really bad actor, their reaction maybe doesn't make sense, or it's slightly over the top. I felt like everything he did in the movie was kind of really on par for where it should have been, for like the time and everything. So I thought that was really interesting. And then later on, I guess he totally lost his mind and ran for Congress. Well, you should look him up afterwards. I didn't really get into it too far, but I looked him up a little bit. And the dude was a real character. He passed away like 5 or 10 years ago or something like that. But his story is kind of
so I'm actually on his Wikipedia page right now, and you're right, he passed away in 2017. But you said that he did some pornos in the 70s, and my first thought immediately was, well, I need to read some titles of the movies that he
okay,
did.
go for it.
So and they're all here as far as I know. So I'm just gonna fly through a few of these just really quick. So there's one called The Love Bus. There's one that is just called Cheese, and his role is there's no name for his role. Maybe he plays cheese. I'm not sure. There's one called The Switch or How to Alter Your Ego, and the name of his character is Huntington Van Huff. Now that's like a soap opera porn name if I've ever heard one.
For sure.
Let's see. What else do we have to do? What else do we got here? We've got The Passions of Carol. There's one called Bloodbath. There's one called Slippery When Wet. Oh, I don't like this one. There's one called Virgin Snow.
Ooh, wow.
I don't want to know what that one's about.
Wow. Okay.
Similarly, there's one called The Trouble with Young Stuff, and he plays, get this, he plays Lane the Milkman.
Nice.
What?
Nice.
So, yeah, there was, it's funny looking at his filmography here because there are, I guess, well, there's a couple of these movies that have like their own dedicated Wikipedia pages, but most of them don't. And then it gets to 1979, and he's in The Warriors playing a policeman number 3. And from then on, it's like all like studio movies like Gloria, Southern Comfort, Poltergeist, 48 Hours, Predator, Action Jackson. So, hey, wherever you can get your start, man, that's, that's all right. No judgment here.
Oh yeah, I'm not giving him any type of shit about it. I mean, hey, everybody's got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And he made a fairly decent career out of movies, for somebody who started in the adult sector, which doesn't happen very often. Normally when somebody goes and they start in adult movies, they don't really make a successful transition. So hats off to the guy. He made a pretty successful transition over there.
Yeah. He's pretty interesting in this movie because there's, we talk about mystery as far as the Predator goes. Lots of mystery with that guy. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of lines, not a lot of screen time, but he's very stoic, very quiet, and the way he dies off camera, but he pretty much just kind of lets the Predator come and get him. He's on that log or that collapsed tree over that river and, cuts his chest. So he starts bleeding and the Predator can see him better. And then we just see, the rest of the team escaping through the jungle. We hear him scream off camera. There are lots of good death screams in this movie too, which I have to say I'm a fan of.
Yeah, me too. Again, my fondness for this movie, so I don't even really need to get into the details of that. But it's just he was a very interesting character. Secondary to him, I want to talk about the villain real quick. So, the Predator is played by a pretty talented character actor in Hollywood who unfortunately died really young and didn't have a very long career. It's Kevin Peters. And the only other thing I could think of really that he's really majorly known for is playing Harry in Harry and the Hendersons.
Yes, I did see that.
But he...
A movie that made me cry, by the way, as a child.
I was a kid,
Harry and the Hendersons.
I'm certain I cried during Harry and the Hendersons. 100% certain. He, from everything I can read on him, he seemed to be just a really well-liked, very soft-spoken, intelligent person. And everybody really liked him. I think he brought a menacing presence to the character, though. Because the guy was like 7 foot tall, very lanky and athletic, and the way he moves as the Predator is very athletic and deliberate. As he's like walking across rocks, he's got the heavy thump, and it's like everything. He's very confident in the way he moves, which I would imagine would be hard as an actor being covered in that much prosthetics to be confident, moving across rocks in a riverbed. But just his ability to do that and carry that suit makes a very menacing bad guy. Where I'm going with all this, though, is did you read, while you were doing your research, who was initially cast to play the bad guy in this movie?
I did. And it's watching this movie and, to your point, like the Predator's great. He's super scary. Like you said, like great physicality to the character. I could not imagine someone like Jean Claude Van Damme, of all fucking people, God love him, doing anything with this character that ended up in this movie. Like it's so crazy to me that he was hired and worked on this movie. There are pictures of him on the set, and he got fired, and the rest, as they say, is history.
He actually does make it to the film, though.
Oh, he does?
He does. Not as the Predator. The last scene, well, one of the last scenes where we see Arnold's character, after the Predator initiates the explosion on his wrist gauntlet, and it's counting off, you see Arnold get up and start running. They do a shot from back a little ways, and all you can see is his figure running. You can't see his face. And then he dives this really crazy, exaggerated dive over a tree. That's actually Van Damme that did the stunt work for that scene.
Oh, okay.
So he actually did make it to camera. I don't know if he's even credited on the movie, to be honest, but I do know that that's actually Van Damme. And if you know that and you go back and you watch it, you can tell it's not Arnold. The character's just like that scene where he's running, he just doesn't look as big, and he looks like he's running in a lot more athletic way than I've ever seen Arnold run. So it totally makes sense that that's not actually Arnold in that scene. But it's just really interesting. The rough cuts and everything I saw of the character, like that they had set up for him. So they put him in basically like this orange suit, and I think what they were going to do was kind of digitize a lot of the features on him, which I can't even imagine doing back in 1987 and making it look presentable, to try to like go in and green screen essentially is what they were doing. Character. But the suit they had him in is just the most comical thing I have ever seen in my life. Did you see that when you were looking it up?
No, I didn't. There's one picture of him in this, again, this actually no, you're what there's a picture in this Hollywood Reporter oral history of what appears to be a short man in like a bright red suit. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, that's what it is. And apparently, hold on. This is what it was supposed to actually look like. You give me 1 second here. I don't know if I can make this picture big enough for you to see it or not. You know what I could probably do? I can just probably share it. Hold on.
Yeah, man. Yeah, the red suit definitely looks silly. And then there's another really good picture in this in this oral history, which if you haven't read it, again, HollywoodReporter.com. I don't know what year. I think it was for the 30th anniversary, so it's a few years old, but it's really interesting. There's another picture of Jean-Claude out of costume, but he's got like the Predator arm, one of the Predator arms, and he's sitting next to Carl Weathers, who was missing his arm. So that's a pretty funny picture too.
Here, I'm gonna send this to you via text because I can't share on the screen.
All right,
but you can look at the craziness of this costume. What they ended up with is a way better version, obviously. Way more iconic.
Yes.
Apparently, the whole idea for casting Van Damme was that the Predator would use karate initially. I'm so glad. I'm so glad they didn't go that route. This movie would have been so cheesy, and probably would not have made the mark on Hollywood and young kids like me that it did. Had you had Van Damme, running around in what looks to be a crab suit, doing high kicks.
Yeah, and it's almost got like a rat head, right? Yeah. Like it looks like a giant rat.
It's a really, really weird look. I don't like it. I'm glad they decided not to go that route at all.
Yeah.
One more little piece of trivia about the villain. So when he takes off his mask and he's looking at Arnold, you can see he's got the mandibles that expand out this way, and like his teeth are kind of clicking together, and he's making like this like weird sound.
Sure.
That was done by a voice actor. I can't remember his name, but it's the same guy who voiced Optimus Prime in the 1980s Transformers cartoon, which I just found to be a little interesting piece of trivia, that like that's Optimus Prime.
Yeah, I mean, once you get into that sort of thing, doing the voice acting or whatever voiceover, whatever it is, like they call you. That's like, man, that's the dream. Megan is my lovely wife. Megan is like very very sweet to me, and she encourages me to do things like that. Like, oh, you should like do voiceovers. Like, you have a nice voice, like voice work. And I'm like, I'm not Optimus Prime. I'm not James Earl Jones. I can't do this as CNN. I can't do that stuff. I can host a podcast about action movies. I'm okay with that. But it's funny. Nonetheless, I appreciate the sentiment.
It's funny you mentioned that. First and foremost, I've always thought you had a really good speaking voice and could do voiceover work. But
oh, thank you. Oh, sorry, my voice just cracked. Jesus Christ, what happened there? Continue.
Secondary puberty?
Yeah, it's a bitch.
Danny actually encourages me all the time because I do voices. It's something that I don't think I ever really did when we were kids because I was always embarrassed. Like we've talked about this before. Mm-hmm. You remember what it was like to be in like 6th, 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade. Like, you were so afraid to like trip over yourself and then be a laughing stock that you really didn't put yourself out there sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
So I've been doing voices for years. And Danny thinks they're absolutely hysterical. And she's been pushing me to try to do try to like make some tapes and do some voice acting. I may try to give it a try.
Yeah, it can't hurt, right?
Can't hurt. I mean, I don't want to do. I'll be honest. I mean, this is going to sound bad from somebody who went into the medical field. I don't know if I want to be a nurse the rest of my life. So maybe try to work on something.
Oh, that's okay.
So
something else, yeah. I mean, maybe we need to do some acting, the two of us together. Yeah. Maybe that could be a bonus thing.
Yeah,
where we read a script.
Ooh.
Do like a live read.
Ooh, I like this. Stroking the beard because I like.
Yeah. We can talk about it later.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so when I was watching this movie, and I'm kind of jumping to the end here.
No, it's fine. Let's hear your thoughts because you know my thoughts on it.
So, on the whole, I found this movie enjoyable. I think the plot is like a little bit thin, but there's enough there to kind of make it make sense for the most part. But, I kind of compare it to, I hate to keep bringing up professional wrestling, but this movie to me is kind of like watching a wrestling pay-per-view where the undercard is a little underwhelming, but the main event is awesome. And you get a good one-match show, and that's good enough to leave,
the rest of it.
To carry the rest of it and leave like a positive memory because it's the last thing you see. It's the main event. And that's how I feel about this movie because for all its shortcomings and all the things that it doesn't have or doesn't do well, the final cat and mouse game and the final fight between Dutch and the Predator is incredible. It's great. Oh, yeah. It's so great.
It's absolutely great. And we've talked about this before. I love when people curse. I think it's great. It's like it's like icing on cake for me. Arnold has got the best motherfucker I've ever heard in a movie in that closing fight. I can't do it. I can't do it justice. But just the way he's like, you one ugly motherfucker. Like it rolls off the tongue. It's chewy. I could go back and just replay in motherfucker like 100 times in that part specifically because I just think it's great. But again, like you said, the fight scene, that last bit is it's pure sweetness on top of the cake. If you can make a really good icing, you can make a really shitty cake taste bad or taste good. To me, this is a cake that I'll agree with you. I think the front end of it leaves a little bit to be desired sometimes, but I feel like for me, there's enough there, because they come in, you see the meeting with the general and Carl Weathers. Then they have this really cool helicopter scene, which I think is really only there to flesh out the fact that Dutch and Dylan had past history. It's really not there for anything else.
Yeah.
But they start out and they're playing is that Little Richard?
Long Tall Sally. Yeah.
So they're playing Long Tall Sally and they're flying in these helicopters and it's this really cool scene where they're flying in the helicopters, and from what I understand, those were like U.S. Army helicopters. The U.S. Army actually did those scenes and let them film it because the maneuvers were so hard. They were flying really close to the jungle canopy, and they're kind of moving back and forth. Like they get this really kind of erratic flight pattern. They didn't think that they would allow, they didn't want to allow anybody else to use the helicopters. Those were apparently like retired helicopters that the studio bought from the U.S. Army, and then they contracted the Army to come and fly them, which I find to be a really interesting thing. But I feel like that is a nice lead up. And then you get your first really big action scene when they take on the rebels, which is so over the top.
Yeah.
So over the top.
Oh, yeah.
It's got, several really good one-liners in it. It's good. It's like if you're building a cake and you got your first layer of cake, that's the first bit of icing in between your second layer there. And then you get a second layer of cake where there's, some plot going on. Some of it could be gone. Some of it couldn't be gone. Like the scene where they catch the predator in the jungle net because it can see everything else, but it can't, differentiate the jungle net. Good scene, sets up, everything that goes on, after that. So for me, I see what you're saying, that there are some low, like little low parts, but I feel like the rest of it just makes that stuff good enough to where you can just really gloss over it really easily.
Yeah. I like that you brought up the one-liners because we haven't really talked about them yet, and we're, getting towards the end here, relatively speaking. But yeah, I think one of my, there's a bunch of them, but when they're going in for the ambush to what they think is like a hostage thing, and it ends up not being that because Dylan has tricked them, but it's Pancho and Blaine trying to take out the guards, and Pancho goes, "Oh, you're hit, man, you're bleeding," and what does Blaine say? "I ain't got time to bleed," and Pancho's just like, "Oh, okay, you got time to duck."
That's a great line. That's a great interaction. Some people hate Jesse Ventura. I kind of like him. I think he was perfectly cast in that role. I can't see anybody else playing that role of Blaine. Yeah. He doesn't have a whole lot. He doesn't have a ton of lines. He just comes across as this badass motherfucker that carries like this ungodly gun around. I mean, he's carrying like a minigun around. Like that's the same gun that the Terminator carried at the end of T2. Like it's a heavy, heavy gun. I mean, that thing probably weighs 50, 60 pounds. And then all the ammo on his back, he's just mowing motherfuckers down with it.
It's so over the top. It's so ridiculous. Now that I think about it, this might be. I don't know. I was going to say that this might be the only movie that we do on this podcast that stars 2 future United States governors in it. Unless we do The Running Man, I guess, at some point. This would be the only one, right?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, at least, it's definitely one.
Isn't that crazy to think about, that both of those guys ended up being governors of states in America?
What I find really funny about that, I'm going to point something out here real quick. They both ran under, the Republican Party, but they were both fairly liberal governors. And after they were out of office, the constituents in the state all missed them and said they did a good job, which I find really interesting. So, like I said, a lot of people hate Jesse Ventura and think he's like a douche or whatever. I like the guy. But yeah, you're right. I can't think of another action movie we're going to do. Hell, I don't know if there's any movies we're going to do where somebody went into politics afterwards. I'm trying to think of action stars, and there's not a whole lot of them that made the jump to politics.
No, it's really just Arnold and Jesse Ventura, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Ventura's really probably got the more interesting career there out of the two of them, because he started out, he went, a lot of people don't know this. One of the reasons he was cast in that role was not only because he was, a famous wrestler, but he was also a Navy SEAL.
Mm-hmm.
So he did a lot of the tactical advisement for that, because he went through Navy SEAL training. It was an active Navy SEAL. So kind of an interesting career in life, interesting cat. to say the least.
Yeah. I like his voice. I think he's a great talker. I mean, I think that just comes from, being such a he was never a great wrestler, but he was always a great talker, and he did like commentary for the WWF for years after he stopped wrestling. And you get a guy like that who can talk like that in a movie like this, even with not very many lines. He's going to stand out because that's what, as a pro wrestler, that's what he's trained to do, in a way. You know what I mean? So, I appreciate his presence in this movie for sure. And I was a little sad when he met his end by the hands of the Predator.
I mean,
but it had to happen. The plot needs it to happen.
Everybody's gonna die, in this kind of movie, except for obviously one person, and the person who's gonna survive is gonna be the top billed actor on the script. So we knew it wasn't gonna be him, but I'm with you. I was kind of it's sad to see him go. I would have liked to see him make it a little further, but I understand why they had him go. It gives character development to other characters. Without him dying, you don't kind of get the de-evolution, let's say, of Bill Duke's character, Mac. Because after he loses his best friend, he basically kind of goes crazy.
Yeah, a little bit.
So his death ultimately sets up further death and makes the story make sense. Because otherwise, if he had not died, the group probably would have never split up. Like when the Predator attacked, they probably all would have stayed together, which would have made it harder to split the group up and bring it down to one person. So I think it had to happen when it did. I kind of would like to have seen him stick around, though.
Yeah, me too. But again, you're totally right. Like, it makes sense from the perspective of, Mac, what happens to Mac after Blaine dies. And then because of what happens to Mac, that is how Dylan ultimately meets his end as well. In a particularly gruesome scene where he just gets his arm chopped off and then still tries to fight back. Respect for that. I think
might have one of the best death scenes in the movie, because the Predator blows his arm off with a little shoulder cannon. And then, he tries to fight back, but, the Predator stabs him in the gut and then lifts him up in the air to, disembowel him, I guess, because it kind of cuts out after that. You're not really sure what happens. Cool scene, man. Just like I said, this movie's gory the whole way through, and that's a really, really good death scene. The only thing in this movie that I think is more brutal than that is the way that I can never remember his name. The other character that we see who Are you looking at the cast?
Yeah.
Okay. Who's the
Poncho? Is it Poncho?
Thank you. So I thought, and I didn't even realize it until just this time watching it, I thought that log that comes down and hits him was part of their traps. It wasn't. The Predator just happened to shoot that tree branch, and it just happened to have vines on it. They just brought it down in the exact path to crack him right in the ribs with this very heavy log. Dude, to me, that might be one of the most brutal things that you see in the whole movie. Because, you see the way he's acting after, they get him up. You could tell, he's in excruciating pain.
Mm-hmm.
And just barely able to make it. But, as soon as that happens, I'm like, well, he's going to die. I mean, he's going to die really soon. Because they're not going to hamper Arnold's character with carrying him through the rest of the movie, which I think at that point was still 35 or 40 minutes. There's no way.
Yeah, I think so.
There's no way that they're going to stick that, on the lead. He's going to die really quickly. And within about 2 or 3 minutes, he's dead. But it's just, man, this movie's brutal. It really is. When you watch the death scenes and the way people are dispatched in this movie, they're all really brutal and bloody and nasty. And that's why I say this movie really kind of falls under a horror movie category. As much as it falls under an action or sci-fi movie, it has to be categorized as a horror movie too. Yeah,
no, there's lots of blood, bodies skinned alive, intestines, guts. We see it's kind of like a wide shot, but we see a shot of the Predator in a tree, just ripping a guy's skull and spine out from his body. It's it's
And
pretty
then
wild.
and then he just boots
So
the
yeah, I
body
mean,
out of the tree like fuck.
yeah, exactly. And then like we see like a little, there's like a little close up scene of him, of the Predator, like kind of like stroking one of the skulls that
Yeah.
he's got, which I thought was pretty strange. But you know, in the context of being a big game hunter, I guess that's your prize. If you're a big game hunter and you're a hunter, an alien hunter of humans, then you know, it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah.
But definitely scary and definitely gross.
Agreed.
I just want to very quickly say that you had mentioned the Predator's voice and vocalizations, whatever you want to call them. Peter Cullen is the name of the actor who supplied those. Same guy who did Optimus Prime in the Transformers animated series and in the live action films. So Peter Cullen, shout out to him, and you know, just crossing our T's and dotting our I's on that end.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate that. I was not going to look that up, and I'm glad that you're a thorough man.
No, that's quite all right. Yeah. So, I mean, do we want to bring up anything else? I mean, I guess we could talk a little bit more about the final fight scene.
Well,
I like that.
Let's go back because you're talking about one-liner.
Yeah. Okay.
What was your favorite one-liner in the movie?
Yeah. I mean, you know, this one's full of lines that I think have like kind of like transcended this movie, right? Get to the chopper. Yeah. If it bleeds, we can kill it. What else am I missing? You know, I mentioned I ain't got time to bleed. I like I ain't got time to bleed. That might be the best one in my mind.
That's a good one.
But what about you?
I don't know. For some reason, one that always sticks out in my head when I think of the movie is the scene where they're taking on the rebels, and the one guy is sneaking up behind Arnold, and he pulls out what I think was supposed to be a knife, but turns out to be like a fucking machete, and like spins around and like, throws it through the guy's chest. And then that really like smirky, like stick around, you know, like I think that's a great one-liner. You're one ugly motherfucker. That's a great one-liner. I've seen that in other movies. They actually use that same line in Predator 2, slightly different, and it's just as good in that one as it is in this one.
Yeah.
What else? I mean, those are really like all my favorites.
Yeah, you had mentioned the stick around scene. That's a good one too. And then like a couple minutes later, Arnold knocks down that door with he like kicks down the door and is like knock knock. Like, all right, okay. Don't know if the knock knock was necessary, but I appreciate that it's there nonetheless.
Yeah, well again, man, like this movie's got some great one-liners. Great action. Let's proceed and we'll talk about the end real quick before we start to wrap this up.
Yeah, so, I mean, the Predator, for those of you who are unfamiliar, the Predator sees in what I would call like a sort of like infrared vision. He sees body heat, and that's how he hunts, right? So the way that Dutch, Arnold's character, circumvents this, and it almost happens by accident, is he escapes the Predator initially, and he escapes into a body of water, swims to shore, and he's covered in mud when he reaches the shore. The Predator is trailing him, and there's a very scary shot, or, you know, shot, whatever you want to call it, where you hear like a large splash behind Dutch, right? You don't see anything, you just hear the splash, but you know it's the Predator. But because Dutch is covered in mud, the Predator cannot see him. And, you know, it's a little on the nose, but as the Predator walks away, Dutch is like, oh, you couldn't see me. You know, it's like, okay, yeah, no, we know that. But so that's kind of how the cat and mouse game starts, because Dutch spends the night in the jungle. He's trailing the Predator. He builds like this very somewhat elaborate trap for the Predator with like wooden spikes, and there's like a big like tree that's hanging suspended above this, like it's like a gulch basically. And he builds a bow and arrow. Very impressive. I don't know where he got all these skills, but doesn't matter. Not important. And that's kind of where the cat and mouse game starts, and where, you know, the Predator is trailing Dutch is trailing the Predator, and they kind of, you know, the Predator is confused because he doesn't know where Dutch is, and Dutch is, you know, dealing with this thing that he's never dealt with before, and like doesn't really know what to do with it, but is, you know, using his skills as best he can. And it's really interesting. It's very different compared to the way a lot of these movies tend to end. You know, like super creative, and you know, again, you're one ugly motherfucker, super funny. Yeah, and it's yeah, it's a good scene in the sense that, you know, it leaves it leaves it kind of open ended. You know, Dutch survives and escapes, but you know the predator has not really been dispatched.
No, you're right.
And
It leaves it open ended of
yeah,
like you understand like okay that predator's gone, but you know throughout the movie you're kind of given the idea that like there's probably more of them. You know the way they set it
mm-hmm.
up. Well, you know like he's a hunter. You know and he's killing us one by one like a hunter. Kind of gives you the idea that there's probably more out there somewhere and leaves it open for
Yeah,
the sequel. You know, I think I read somewhere when this movie was first written, they had no idea or no plans to make sequels out of it. But it got such good reviews. It was so, you know really well received that they basically were like, we have to like we got to go. You know, we got to go forward
yeah.
with this. Funny enough, a little bit more trivia real quick before we swap over before we start winding down here. Arnold was, I guess, supposed to reprise his role in the second movie, and
Uh
contractually
huh.
couldn't because he was filming Terminator 2. That's how Danny actually got in
Oh,
the
okay.
movie. Danny Glover wasn't even on the radar for this. Probably wouldn't have got it had it not been for Lethal Weapon a couple years prior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
yeah. That is
I think we
interesting.
should shoehorn this in and do Predator 2 next week because
Yeah, we can. That's fine. You're putting it on the air, so you're really putting me on the spot here. I guess we have to, huh?
maybe that was my idea. Just kidding.
Oh, you're a rascal. You're a real scamp.
No, I think this is
Yeah.
one we need
So
to do like that. We need to do these back to back because if we wait 6 months or so, you know, Predator One's going to kind of not be in your head anymore. It'll be in my head, but you might not. It won't be as fresh in your head anymore. So
yeah.
I think it's a good.
Okay. No, you've convinced me. It's fine with me, man. But with that in mind, let's do our fists rating. James.
You know, I go back and forth a lot of times when we rate these movies, and I know this movie's got some shortcomings. We talked about those. But for me, and maybe this is just sentimental value and the way it makes me feel, reminds me of uh, this one gets a five fist from me, hands
Mm-hmm.
down. I mean, again, I don't feel like like if you take something like, I think I rated Die Hard as a five fist. We need to keep a tally of this so we know what we've actually rated. But I'm pretty sure I rated Die Hard five fist. Die Hard's a way superior movie. Well, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Better written, better acted, better played. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a better produced movie to get a high vote. You know, how do you feel when you watch the movie? What did you take away from it? I think as far as action movies go, this one basically has everything you need.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got to be a five fist for me.
Okay. All right. I think, I had mentioned some of the stuff about it at the top that I kind of thought it was missing. It's like again, like I look at this movie like a wrestling pay-per-view with a great main event and a somewhat underwhelming undercard. But the main event is so great that it lifts everything else up. So with that in mind, I think I'm going to give it 3.5 fists.
Okay.
That's my rating for Predator.
Okay.
And I think that's a perfectly fine rating. It's a good rating. Any movie should be
I think
happy
this
with
is the
that.
first time we've been so far apart on a rating, though. I think normally
I think so.
our ratings are about a half a fist of each other, and this one they're like a block away.
Yeah, so this will be the final episode of Going Commando. This is irreconcilable differences that we're experiencing here, James and I, and it's been a fun few months, but it's time for us to go our separate ways. And no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I mean, again, like you talked about your personal experience and your heartfelt experience with this movie, and there's you can't put a price on that, man. So I understand the 5-star or the 5 fist rating. I do. There there are probably movies that I would feel the same about. I think anybody would. So I think it makes all the sense in the world. So totally fine with me. The integrity of our fists rating system, in my mind, remains completely intact. And with that, I think that's a good place to end it for tonight. Don't forget to follow us on social media. Go on Commando Pod on Instagram and Twitter. You can find our Discord as well. Go to the link in our social media profiles. I haven't mentioned this in the prior episodes, but if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, on iTunes, if you can give us reviews on iTunes, it really helps us in the algorithm and helps our show be seen by more people. So if you're listening on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, whatever you call it these days, give us a 5-star rating, 5-fist rating. Please, if you're going to give us like a 1 or a 2, just like don't rate us. Fuck you. Don't do that. But if you want to give us a good rating there, that would be very helpful. And that is going to do it. So we'll be back in a couple of weeks with Predator 2.
Yes, sir.
And yeah. Good night, folks.
Good night.